A completely black frame with no visible content or imagery.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tent of Many Voices and the Core of Discovery 2. My name is Laura Clifford, and I'm an interpretive park ranger with the project. We are a traveling exhibit visiting communities along the Lewis and Clark Trail, educating folks about all different aspects of the Lewis and Clark expedition. We have a lot to offer you today. The exhibit tent over here, where you can walk through and look at our panels or take an audio tour, replicas of many of the vessels that they used on their waterways, the keelboat, the dugout canoe, the pirogue. Some of our cooperative federal agencies are set up, the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM and the Montana National Guard, so please join them and visit with them for a while. The Tent of Many Voices was a place designed to bring in many people of professional backgrounds and cultures to share with us their knowledge as it relates to the Lewis and Clark expedition. And so for this hour, I'd like to welcome Sandy McFarland. She works for the U.S. Forest Service and the Nez Perce National Historic Trail, and she is going to be talking about nature's supermarket. So please welcome Sandy McFarland.
A person stands at a wooden podium on a small stage, holding papers. An American flag is visible on the right side. A banner listing various federal departments is draped across the front of the stage.
Katsiyaw. Thank you. Tots Kalawit. Good afternoon. I'll give you just a little bit of information about myself. I'm an enrolled member with the Nez Perce tribe. I'm half French and half Nez Perce. My educational background, I have a master's degree in anthropology from the University of Idaho, and my minor is in wildland recreation and tourism. By trade, I'm an archaeologist. I worked as an archaeologist for a number of years for private corporations. I worked for the Nez Perce tribe as a cultural resource director for 4 years, and then I moved into a career with the Forest Service. I worked as an archaeologist, an interpretive specialist, a tribal liaison, and most recently, I'm very honored and privileged to have an important position in serving as the administrator for the Nez Perce National Historic Trail. The Nez Perce Trail is the only historic trail that is administered by the Forest Service, so it's a little bit of a uniqueness to us. We take great pride in working with our sister agencies in the Park Service, BLM, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as state and private folks. Today we're going to be talking about Nature Supermarket, basically everything that was available when Lewis and Clark came across the trail. Everything that was available prior to Lewis and Clark is pretty much available today in Nature Supermarket. I do expect you to take notes. There will be a short quiz at the end, okay? I have to ask this question. Is it warm enough for everyone? Are you okay? Oh, good. Okay. Okay. I grew up in a very traditional Nez Perce home. We call ourselves Namipu, which means the people. And I had the opportunity to grow up with my grandparents, aunts and uncles, and an extended family. And I learned a lot about the use of medicines to gather different supplemental foods. However, by the time I became a teenager, somehow I figured out that I knew everything. And I became very disinterested. I thought that this type of information was not important to me. I was so wrong. By the time I went to college, I realized I'd made a big mistake. At that point, I started to come back and work with medicine women in my tribe and also with our respected tribal elders to try to piece together the information that I was now lacking. Unfortunately,
a person stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, wearing a dark sleeveless top. A blank white screen or display is visible behind them. The setting appears to be indoors with a dark background.
What happens when these tribal elders pass away is their knowledge base. And so a lot of the information is not complete as to the time of year to collect and harvest plants, to the time of the preparation, what is the steps that you go through. Also, some of the Nez Perce names are no longer available. As we go through this PowerPoint, we'll have the common name and the scientific name as well as the Nez Perce name. If you don't see a Nez Perce name, that means we simply do not any longer have that information. Can everyone hear me okay out there? Okay, I know this isn't very conducive to the setting, but Trust me, they're gorgeous photos because I took them, okay? All right, here we go. You know, the Nez Perce people were very resourceful, and they generally utilized the entire plant when they were harvesting and processing for medicinal uses as well as supplemental foods. My belief is by documenting this experience of the flora that was used by these people helps us to place them in their environment of the context of what it was like for them 200, 300, 1,000, 10,000 years ago. It also helps us to understand the dynamics of their culture, as well as it gives us a good understanding of where we can find significant cultural remains today. It's really my hope in giving these presentations that it will lead everyone here to acquire a better appreciation and an understanding of the importance of these plants and the importance of capturing this information. It really is an untapped resource. I think you'll find some really extraordinary uses that's being used today in the medicinal fields that was being used by the Nez Perce thousands of years ago. So I think there are opportunities for more medicinal discoveries as well as opportunities in feeding third world countries or maybe even our own country if it ever comes to that. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with some trees. I have over 100 slides, so I know you don't want to sit there that long, so we'll just get through as many as possible. The first one you're looking at is the grand fir, and the ointment, they used the resin as an ointment, and they would rub it on their chest for treating colds, pretty much like Vicks Vapor Rub today. Many of the trees that we're going to look at, they would boil the needles or the boughs. And has anyone ever tried that? You ever chewed on a bough before? Oh, okay. So they're pretty sour, aren't they? So what they would do is they would oftentimes add honey to offset that real bitter taste. By boiling a tea from this particular tree, it was used in treating whooping cough, which was an introduced disease. They would boil the needles and they would make it into an eye wash. Now, as we go through these, you'll notice there was quite a few different preparations.
A person with short dark hair speaks at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white document. They wear a dark sleeveless top and a lanyard. A seal visible on the podium reads Tribes of Discovery. Black fabric drapes the background.
For eye washes. The Lewis and Clark journals mentioned this was a big problem for the Nez Perce when they came through the area. We're not really sure why. They would also use the finely pulverized dried needles, and it served as a baby powder. There's a lot of uses for the subalpine fir. It was used as an incense, it was powdered, and then it was mixed with bear grease. Later in life it was mixed with lard, and they would put it on open wounds and sores, abrasions, like scrapes. They would also use the pulverized needles as a body deodorant. So just like we go to town today and get our deodorant, we had it here naturally at Nature's Supermarket. The fir could be powdered and mixed with lard as a hair oil. Now here we go. Rogaine has nothing on the Nez Perce people. They would use this as a hair restorer, and it would also turn the hair a greenish hue or color, which was considered to be very attractive back then. It was also highly regarded in spiritual beliefs that it was one method of keeping bad spirits away. Whoops, sorry, I touched something here that I shouldn't have. Technical difficulty. Either they have to train you in the different uses, or I bring my own laptop next time.
Let me get it for you.
Okay.
Just kind of got out of that one form, so we'll do this. And then go to, were you about right there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what happened, but just.
Me either. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I really do know how to use my own laptop. Okay. The water birch served one purpose. They would use the hollowed out cavities, which provided a sap, and it was mixed with very cool water. It was considered a very refreshing beverage. The next is the western larch, often referred to as the tamarack. They would use the hardened sap as a chewing gum. Has anyone done that? Yeah, all right. They would also use the sap as a syrup. The process involved leaving the sap in the hollowed out portion of the trunk of the tree, and then it allowed a natural evaporation, and it concentrated the sugars as such. Some say the sap could be used to plaster hair into place. So there we go. Now we have a hair gel. This tree was first observed by Lewis and Clark in the Bitterroot in September of 1805. The Engelmann spruce, they would use the branches for cleansing one's home.
A person speaks at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white laptop or document. They wear a dark sleeveless top. Behind them is a black backdrop with a visible seal or emblem on the podium. A white tent structure is visible above.
This was after there was a death in the family. And when we're talking about these more historic uses by the Nez Perce, many of these are still being utilized today. I know my family, we go out, we gather a number of these trees and berries and roots for the same purposes. The powder from the fir tree was utilized in ridding the elk and buffalo robes of ticks and fleas. Another little anecdote of Lewis and Clark, they noted in their journals that the Nez Perce didn't have a problem with flicks and teas in the elk robes and buffalo robes. However, when they traveled down the Columbia River, as to what we call the river Indians, it seemed to be more of a problem there. So that was one way to take care of that. The white bark pine, they would utilize the seeds by roasting them and cracking them open. The lodgepole, one of the uses where they were going after the cambium, which is the inner, where you would peel the inner bark and get to the inside layer of the tree there. Has anyone tried that? No? You got to try this one. It's very good. Sometimes it's referred to as an emergency or starvation food because it was readily available throughout the winter. A number of trees were used to reach the cambium layer, so it wasn't just the lodgepole pine. And we'll talk about a couple of those a little bit later. But these trees, we have numerous trees along the Nez Perce National Historic Trail, which, by the way, as you probably know your history of Lewis and Clark, from the Big Hole National Battlefield all the way to the Weippe Prairie in Idaho, as they cross the Bitterroots, that trail is virtually parallel or one and the same. So they were basically on the on the Nez Perce Trail when they were coming across. Another use is they would use the buds and they would chew them up, and it helped when you had a sore throat. So there's our throat lozenge. The other thing that the Nez Perce women did is they would utilize the poles for their teepee poles as well as the travois poles. And just as an aside note, both the travoises and the teepees belong to the women. That's another whole slideshow, but I'll mention it for you. The green cones of the western white pine were put into a fire. They would roast them and crack them open, and of course they were going after the seeds, which were very tasty, much like the sunflower seeds are today. The ponderosa pine is another one that was very popular for the cambium that they were going after, and that's primarily what this was considered the best source for. Medicinal qualities, they would use the green needles, they would mulch them all up, and they would rub them throughout the hair, and it was perfect for dandruff. Another is they would use the pitch, they would rub it on for backaches and rheumatism. They also used the pitch, now hang on because I think this one.
A person stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white document or paper. They wear a dark sleeveless top. A circular seal reading Core of Discovery is visible on the podium. Black curtains form the backdrop.
Sometimes it's a little scary. They used the pitch as a chewing gum. Anyone done that? Okay, good. They used it as glue. They used it on their torches for fishing at night in canoes and in the semi-subterranean pit houses. So lots of uses for that. The ponderosa pine was known to Lewis and Clark as the long leaf pine, and they collected samples of this particular tree from the Clearwater River area in Idaho. The quake and aspen, they would use the ruptures by going after the ruptures for utilizing the bark. What I would call the leaves of it served to help with colds when they turned that into a tea, and they could powder and mix it with bear grease. Later, they used lard, and it was used in promoting the healing of burns. The Douglas fir, another one, they would boil it up and make it as a tea for treating colds. The rotted wood from the tree is what they used for smoking hides, which gave it that nice brown color. The Pacific yew was considered a very resilient wood, so it was excellent for making bows. But one of the more important qualities it had was a medicinal use. This tree was brewed and drank as a tea, and it pretty much helped when a person had overall run-down feelings or no energy. And of course, what is it used for today? Cancer treatment from the Taxol, exactly. The Western red cedar has lots of uses. The bark was used to construct baskets. It was used in sweat house frames. It was used on roofs of the semi-subterranean pit houses. They would use a smaller basket from the roots that was very tightly woven. This particular basket was used as a cooking. So they fill it up with water. They would get stones that are rounded and fit in your hand, and they would put the stones in the water. Then you could chuck your meat in there or your root or whatever you wanted to cook. And it was so tightly woven, it was sealed so that you could cook in that fashion. Some think that the roots were gathered in spring. Other informants say that it was later into the fall, so not sure. Possibly both, depending on where these people lived and the elevations they were at. It's important to remember when we talk about the Nez Perce, there were 13 different bands of Nez Perce at one time, so they weren't all in one congregated location. They also used the cedar in constructing rafts and canoes. The ponderosa pine, as you probably remember from your history of Lewis and Clark, was what they used when they burned them out there near present-day Orofino and used adzes to hew them the rest of the way. Another is that they would use slivers from the cedar and stick it into the meat when they dried it, and it stopped the meat from shrinking up horribly small. In addition to these many
A person with short dark hair stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, wearing a dark sleeveless top. They face a laptop displaying a white screen. A seal reading Core of Discovery is visible on the podium. Black curtains form the backdrop.
Medicinal uses. You could use a tea from this, very familiar for us, and it was used in treating colds and coughs. Again, honey was naturally what they used to offset that bitter taste. Okay, we're going to move out of trees and into the serviceberry, sarvisberry, Saskatoon, known by different names. The berries were edible raw. They could be cooked or even dried. When they dried them, they would pound them into loaves that were approximately 10 to 15 pounds of loaf, and this was stored for winter storage. It could be used in a number of ways. One thing that they would do is they chop off a piece and they throw it into that tightly woven basket we talked about with their meat and prepare a stew. Another thing they would do is just like we eat fruit leather today, chop it off and just eat it naturally. The branches were used in making fishing gaff poles. These are poles that are 6 to 10 feet long, very limber in gaffing salmon and steelhead. Lewis and Clark collected 3 specimens of this variety in 1806 in their travels. One was near Rock Fort Camp, another was on the Clearwater River near present-day Lenore, Idaho, and the last place was on the Lolo National Historic Trail. The kinnikinnick, you can eat the berries, but a primary use of kinnikinnick was used that they mixed it with an existing tobacco or they used it as a tobacco itself. Has anyone tried that one? Okay. You know that you need to be careful when you use this. Depending on the time of the year of harvest, it becomes very stronger. So it has quite an effect. The Oregon red grape, you can eat the berries. The blueberries, they normally cook them, but they could also eat them raw. In addition, there was a tonic that was made from the dried stems and roots. The bark was shredded, and the roots were also served to make a yellow dye. The red stem ceanosis, they would make a salve by collecting the dried and powdered leaves, mixing it with this bear grease. This was applied in treating open sores, abrasions, as well as burns. You could put the leaves directly on as a poultice also. Some say that a concoction was made from the root and used as another hair stimulant. Princess pine was used as an astringent, just like we would use it today in boiling the root. And they would also boil the root and drink it as a refreshing, just a summery drink to have. The virgin's bower, the stems and leaves were boiled to make a medicine if you had an itchy skin condition. The affected areas were washed with a solution, or you could take the boiled root of the plant and rub it directly on your affected area, on your skin.
A person with short dark hair speaks at a wooden podium with a microphone, looking down at papers. A white projection screen is visible behind them. The setting appears to be indoors with dark curtains in the background.
The red osier dogwood, it was considered a resilient wood, so they used it in making bows. They would often mix the leaves with kinnikinnick for tobacco. And Lewis and Clark did collect this species along the Clearwater River as well. How are you doing on notes? Are we going to be okay with 100% at the end? Okay. Not multiple choice, it's fill in the blank, just so you know, okay? All right. The black hawthorn berries were used raw, cooked, or dried, and they were also used in making pemmican. Medicinally, the berries were mashed and used as a tonic to stimulate the heart. It was gathered in July, possibly as late as September, depending on that particular season, and the curved thorns were used as fish hooks. The ocean spray, you can eat the fruit, you can cook it, dry it, or you can have it raw. They would use the leaves and stems in boiling them up in making a tea, and this worked in treating diarrhea, and this is one that does work very well. The prickly pear, the fruit is edible. You can eat it raw, or you could dry it for winter use. They would split the fruit open, discard the seeds, and dry the pulp in the sun. You could also cook it in an earth oven. In the Hells Canyon National Recreation Area within the Snake River, between down there by Lewiston, Idaho, and Clarkston, Washington, when the settlers were moving into the area, they had a problem sometimes with their livestock and sheep not having enough to eat. And another use that they did is they would actually prepare these and feed their stock with it. In scarce times, they singed the spines and fed the pads directly to the livestock. You could place the crushed pads directly on for a backache, and you can make a tea from the plant as well that was thought to treat diarrhea. The branches were dried out of the syringa. They made excellent bows. They made arrow shafts as well as hair combs and pipe stems. The smooth fruits from the sumac were boiled, and it was used for a wash for stopping hemorrhaging after childbirth. The roots could be brewed into a tea. It helped prevent painful urination as well as increase the flow of urination. The moistened sumac leaves or fruits were used as poultices for skin rashes. And some say that a tea from the green or the dried green branches were used in treating tuberculosis when it was made into a tea. You can also use the root as a throat lozenge, and another informant said that if you ate a number of the roots, it served very well as a laxative.
A person with short dark hair stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white document or paper. Behind them is a dark curtain. A seal or logo is visible on the podium.
The woods rose, sometimes called the wild rose. Of course, they were eating the rose hips, raw or cooked, and these again were available well into the winter, so they were often referred to as an emergency food or starvation food. They would use the straight wood for arrow shafts, and they would also take the sprigs of these and wrap them around the cradle boards of babies, so it was thought to keep them safe from bad spirits or ghosts. And of course, what is it used for today? Vitamin C. Thank you. That's an excellent source. The next couple ones we're going to look at, I just throw it in here. They would take the time to pick these and eat them, but they were not gathered in any great abundance. You've all tried these, haven't you? The thimbleberry, so you know how hard it is to get a huge quantity. So they didn't want to expend a whole lot of calories in trying to secure a large source of this one, as well as the blackberry, but they did utilize them. The elderberry is one of the more important berry crops for the Nez Perce people. They ate them raw or cooked, and they would utilize the sections of the large straight shoots as arrows, and they would use the branches in making a musical instrument, the flute. The scour willy was used as an emergency or starvation food. They were using the inner bark. This tastes really, really better, but they would pulverize it up and make it very fine and turn it into a flour, much more compatible to eat. The other use they had was of the willow, which we won't get into today because we just simply don't have the time to cover them all, but it had a very different purpose. So if someone mentions that to you, very different purposes. The buffalo berry was gathered in August. It was often referred to as ice cream berries. And the elders really liked these. They'd collect them and they'd use very cold water and whip them up. And they became foamy, and that's why they called them ice cream berries. You could also collect these and dry them as well. The snowberry, some of you have probably heard, is poisonous. I'm obviously standing before you here today, so it depends on how you prepare it. The leaves and the fruit were crushed and applied to chapped skin, so there goes our chapstick. It could be applied to open sores. An eye wash was made from the boiled root, and this was again for those problems we talked about with their eyes. And they used the twigs in making a brown tea that cured fevers. Children were only to take a very, very small dose of this. The snowberry branches were wrapped around cradle boards to keep bad spirits away, and you could eat the berries if they were dried. Huckleberry was one of the most important huckleberry crops for the Nez Perce. They would pick this.
A person speaks at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white document. They wear a dark sleeveless top. A circular seal is visible on the podium. The background is black with gray fabric at the top.
They would dry them out in the sun or in earth ovens. They were used in pemmican. They were often mixed with the black tree lichen as a confection. Now when I say black tree lichen, you all know what I'm talking about. That's the hairy stuff off the trees. There's black and there's green, as you know. And I have to tell you the story. My aunt ate this every morning for breakfast. And she would take it and put it in our conventional oven. And then later, when we got microwave, she's still done that, stuck it in the microwave. And it gets in like a jelly. And then she'd throw her huckleberries in there and a little bit of cream. I have to tell you, you have to acquire a taste for some of these. And this is one I never acquired a taste for. But I'm sure if I was starving, it would be delicious. The red berries are the grouse berries. You could eat those raw or cooked. They too could be mixed with a tree lichen and making like a mush or confection. The yarrow has a number of uses. You can dry it and pound it up and turn it into a flour to be used in making like cakes or bread. It also, they use the leaves on it in controlling bleeding, like on modern day bandages. Another use that they had was they took the leaves, pulverized them up with the roots, and made like a poultice. And they would put these on bruised areas. And I've actually seen this work with people. My father and my whole family has raised Appaloosa horses for years and broke them. And he had a horse fall back on him and roll on him, and he was bruised very badly. And his dad actually did this, prepared this, made this poultice on him, and it actually not only drew out the pain from the bruising, but also took that coloration away. It was gone like within 24 hours. Amazing plant. The milkweed is another one that was used. You could boil it and make it into a tea. Not sure what they were using that tea for, but they would use the flowers as a meat tenderizer. They would boil the top part of the plant, strain it, and it was used as another eye wash remedy. They would take the dried pulverized roots, which could be chewed automatically if you had a stomach ache, or you could use it as a tea to treat a stomach ache cure. The milky secretions, when they were hardened, was used as a chewing gum. You've seen the milky secretions on these, so you know what I'm talking about at the top. It's a very versatile plant. They would actually pound the stem of this plant, the women would, and they would turn that into fishing nets. So don't let anyone fool you. Nez Perce women own their own fishing nets. It wasn't just men that fished. The only use we have of the showy aster is they would produce a tea from the roots, and it was used in treating gonorrhea, which was another introduced disease.
A person with short dark hair sits at a wooden podium with a microphone, looking down at papers. Behind them is a whiteboard and black backdrop. A seal visible on the podium reads Core of Discovery.
The balsam sunflower roots were harvested often as a complementary root to the more important ones. One that we're not going to talk about today is what the Nez Perce call couse. It's a desert parsley is the generic name of it. That was their major root crop. Not to be confused with the Nez Perce call couse. And that one is the downy-fruited verbane, which is you can find on the internet that people are seeking for its medicinal qualities. But some of these roots, like the sunflower, were considered complementary roots to like the couse or the bitter root. They would use the leaves of this to line the camas bacon ovens is another source. Basically, they were using leaves of anything that was close by, but this was one plant they were using to line those ovens with. You could also parch the seeds and eat them, as well as peel the stems and eat them when they were young. People have done that, right? You've tried this? A few. It's good, isn't it? It's just like mixing like a fresh green salad. It's very good. The Mariposa lily, they were eating the bulbs by boiling them or baking them. Often they bake them with the camas. This one only has one use that I'm aware of. They would use the root and brew a tea, and it was a hair restorer. Camas was the most important root crop for the Nez Perce. You would bake them in an oven. It takes just about 48 hours for them to turn color, and which is a dark brown or black color. They would press these into loaves and dry them so that they were available late into the winter as a winter food. There's lots of areas where these were harvested from meadows. One of the closer ones is Packer Meadows near Lolo Pass on the Idaho-Montana border to us here. The camas will sometimes have a blue-looking flower. Other times it will appear more as a purple flower. Anyone venture to guess why that is? Go ahead and holler it out. Anyone? It's the amount of alkaline or acidity in the soil that causes the color change on the camas flower. The nectar from the Indian paintbrush was a real favorite among the children to suck on. How about that? You guys tried that one? Oh, good. You're missing out on some really fun stuff here. You need to try some of these. The Nez Perce were eating a number of things that typically bear or elk will eat. I'm not going to encourage you to go out and eat everything because I don't want you to poison yourself, but typically that's a rule of thumb. If a bear or an elk could eat it, they would eat it. And they would gather the thistle stems and eat them, which were very tender. They would also get the root and bake them, often with the camas. The same is true for the bull thistle. They were eating the stems.
A person stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white document or paper. They wear a dark sleeveless top and have dark hair with bangs. Behind them is a dark backdrop with a light-colored banner at the top.
As well as the roots, and of course we know how the big game like these as well. The foxglove was used medicinally. The root was boiled and it was used to treat problems with pain in the chest, basically pain with the heart. And today, what is it used for today? Digitalis, which is a heart medication. The dried leaves were used for tea from the firewood. It was thought to be refreshing. You can also, of course, eat, as you probably know, this is when you can peel the stems when they're fairly young and tender, and they're good to eat. Any takers on that one? Tried this one? Saw a few. Good. And did you like it? Yes. All right. See heads going. Good. The bulbs of the glacier lily were usually baked and then dried and stored, but you could also eat the green seed pods raw. Some people refer it to a pale fawn lily, dogtooth violet. I've heard different names. This is another one they didn't spend a lot of time doing, but if it was out there, they ate it. We're going to look at some forbs. This is the showy frasera, also known as clustered. They were eating the bulb of it, baking it as just a supplemental root. Yellow bells, they were eating the corms of the yellow bell. Of course, cleaning them first. This was not a major root crop, but it was one that was considered to be a delicacy when served with the bitterroot. The bitterroot, as you know, was a trade item that the Nez Perce didn't have naturally within their Aboriginal area that they mostly gathered from. However, the bitter root has been introduced to the vicinity of Grangeville, Idaho, and is flourishing quite well there. The roots from the bed straw were used in making a yellow dye. They would often eat the seeds, just like we would eat sunflower seeds today. And the geranium, the roots were mashed and used as a poultice, and they were put on for ladies that were breastfeeding, and it helped to increase the flow of the milk, to bring the milk in, and also to combat any pain associated with breastfeeding. They would also use the root by boiling it, and it was used to treat warts. So another a wart treatment. The parsnip, the cow parsnip, you could eat the roots fresh or dry. They would often apply these to swelling feet to take water retention out of feet. You can peel the stalks. They would eat those raw. And of course, the stalks on these was one of the favorites in making elk whistles. And they did this by drying the stems of them. The use of the round leaf alum root.
A person speaks at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a large white document or poster. Behind them is a black backdrop. A circular seal reading Core of Discovery is visible on the podium.
Was to boil the root to make a tea if you had a stomach ache. If you clean the root, you could chew it and get immediate relief, just like an antacid today provides. Milk of magnesia, what's the pink stuff? Pepto-Bismol, same kind of stuff. The bitter root was highly regarded in trade before it was introduced into the area of Idaho. It was considered one of the 5 top roots for the Nez Perce and the Mi'pu people. Skunk cabbage was used as a medicine for treating arthritis. The leaves also were used in lining the Camas baking ovens. The yellow monkey flower, the roots is made into a tea, and it was used as an aphrodisiac. There are about 17 different species of the monkey flower. The yampa was considered a very important root crop. They were going after these, eating them raw or drying them. They would cook the roots of the buttercup, roast the seeds, and parch those, and eat those as well. Watercress, even though it was introduced by the Europeans, and there are a variety of species, these were collected. They would eat them green, fresh, just like we eat greens today, or they would boil those. And the Solomon seal, they would use the root in making a tea or chew the root itself, and it was served as a laxative. The Western meadow, they would boil it, and I'm talking about the root here, as a tea. It treated fevers, chills, colds in general. This is the male species here. Not sure if the female species gives you those same type of effects or not. The bighead clover, they would eat these fresh. These are the clover tops, or they would even fry these up. Another favorite of big game. The nettles, they would use the nettles, the roots, by boiling them, and you would soak your feet in them. The other use of them is you take them, and of course everyone's familiar with nettles, how they, if you touch them, they feel stingy, right? So they would take this and they would beat themselves, like in the back, upper arm, wherever you would be sore, and then they would go into the sweat house complex. So it was like a deep heat treatment, very similar to what we do with saunas today. But it was a way of opening all of those senses up and preparing those muscles. So that's one use of the nettle, in addition to using it to soak one's feet in. Here's the downy fruited verberine. This is one that we just mentioned earlier, the Nez Perce called kaus kaus. And this is one of the controversial ones for the Nez Perce tribe as a whole, because it's being sold on the internet for its medicinal qualities. It has a number of...
A person with short dark hair stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, reading from a document. They wear a dark sleeveless top with a lanyard. A seal or logo is visible on the podium. Dark fabric backdrop behind them.
Uses, you can chew on it. It helps with colds. I'm talking about the root. You can throw it on the top of your wood stove in a pot of water. It serves as a wonderful vaporizer in treating colds, upper respiratory problems. Won't say a whole lot more about it, but we certainly like people not to destroy all of these areas where Native Americans go to harvest these for their families and their uses. As I said, it can be a very controversial topic on some of these. The important thing is we need to recognize the importance of these plants and trees, how they were used, so that we can retain them for the future generations. The false hellebore was considered a very strong medicine. They would dry the flowered top heads of these, finely pulverize them up, and use them like we would, I want to say an inhaler, but in the nostrils, up the nostrils. Very strong medicine. It opened up decongested areas. The leaves are another one that was used in lining the camas baking ovens. The only use I know of the moth mullein is that they boiled to root, and it was used as a shampoo. It was thought that it made the hair a little darker in color. My grandma used this one a lot. I need to, or else go get some dye here. I noticed that lately. American vetch would just covers the hillsides back around the area of Lewiston, Idaho, and they were eating the stems and seeds, boil them or bake them. The Madagascar periwinkle, they would use the roots in a tea which they drank for overall rundown feelings, just feeling like they didn't have any energy. What do we use it for today? Lupus, did I hear that right? Hodgkin's disease and leukemia, all of the above. Thank you. The mule's ear, they would chop and boil the root for medicinal qualities. I'm not sure what those were. This is another one that they could use the leaf to line the camas baking ovens with. Bear grass was another important crop that's being harvested in great quantities on some of the forests for ornamental uses. It has been another one that's somewhat controversial. The leaves were used in making baskets, and they also used the leaves in stuffing men's saddle pads. Next one we're going to look at is the common horsetail. The stems have a tough outer layer, but when you peel them and get them when they're young, they're really sweet, and that inner pulp is what you're going after. Any takers on that one? Try. Good. Good. I'm glad to see some people have tried these. There is a common name for you.
A person stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, holding a white document. They wear a dark sleeveless top. A circular seal is visible on the podium. A dark backdrop hangs behind them.
We're not going to get into a lot of the mushrooms or some of the others because we do have a time constraint, but the puffball was one that was used as a medicinal purposes, and I'm not sure exactly what all that was used for at this time. So with that, we have time to pass out the test. I think I got the 10-minute mark here, if you're interested. I'm just joking, of course. I appreciate you coming and sitting and listening through this, and I hope that you will gain a greater understanding, as I would like to have this information recorded for future generations so that more and more of it is not lost as people pass away. We have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Sandy? One back over here. Let me get the microphone over here so everyone can hear.
Did you know there's two types of sumac? One of them's poison and one of them's not poison?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Good point. Other questions or a comment?
One right over here.
You spoke of the camas oven. What exactly was that?
The camas ovens, these were pits that were dug into the ground, and they were multi-layered depending basically on what they were using in the area. Modern day times, you can use burlap bags. They had a fire which was built underneath, and then heated rocks underneath. Then you have your protection, you put your roots in, and then you have your steamed leaves that we talked about lining those ovens that offered some water content to it, and a fire built on top. And it took approximately 48 hours. It depended on a lot of things: elevation, how deep your pit was, just a number of things. But basically that's a quick answer to how it's done. You know, something that I found very interesting is I talked to different families. Everyone had a little bit different take on how they like to prepare their their ovens. So I'm giving a real generic answer there.
All right, another question right here.
You had mentioned earlier that there was a flour that was used for the bruising on a member of your family. What's the basis for that help in that flour? What's the medicinal properties that... Is there something that works on the actual visual effect of the bruise or something underneath the skin itself?
It actually is twofold. It's both. It actually works on the actual bruise and lifting the discoloration out, as well as underneath. And I don't know what causes that to happen. I'm not a botanist at all. And as far as my medicine history, I'm an advanced DMT. Doesn't carry me too far. So I really don't know that to try to give you a real good answer. I'm not sure what is in that plant that allows it to be able to offer that kind of help. But it does both.
Some really good questions. We have one more back here.
A person stands at a wooden podium with a microphone, wearing a dark sleeveless top and a lanyard. A laptop is visible on the podium. Behind them is a dark curtain with overhead lighting and what appears to be a tent structure.
I just have a couple of comments. One is the yarrow is an antiseptic. We use it all the time. You use it as an infusion with tea, or you can use it topically, and it will kill pain, like you said. It works wonderfully. The other one is verbascum, and that is used for the lungs. It takes fluid out of the lungs. It's used for rheumatism and for colds, any kind of bronchitis, as a tea.
Great information. Thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
All right, I think we have time for one more question from this young gentleman over here. Just a sec.
Do they use mushrooms at all?
Yes, they used a variety of mushrooms. We have only about 100 slides to go through, so we don't have enough time today, but they do at least 6 different varieties that I'm aware of. Good question.
All right, well, I'd like to thank everyone, and let's thank Sandy McFarland for coming out and sharing with us.
Katsa Yao Yao. Thank you.
If anyone has any further questions for Sandy or wants to chat with her, I'm sure she'd be welcome to field questions back in the back.
A person wearing a blue garment with yellow and green accents stands on a stage. 3 kites are visible in the gray sky above. Neon signage glows in the background.
We're going to continue with our programming in the 10 of Many Voices for today. In about 10 minutes, we'll have Amy Mossett. She's a member of the 3 affiliated tribes. Sandy talked a lot about the plant use in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, and Amy Mossett is going to focus on prairie plant use. So please join us back here in about 10 minutes for our next presentation of the day.